Greetings, Dr. Wendy Farley. It's good to be with you again. And this time, we've been in places that we've been together. I can't say that we've explored space together, but in our musings, we have spent time under the starry skies musing together theologically and philosophically. So I would say that we can say we've been together in the cosmos before.
Definitely.
Yeah. So we're in the cosmos because we are on week 4, which is titled Abyss, Mystery, and Wonder. And I have to admit, this is one of my favorite weeks because even though I'm a researcher and part academic, I also love that we can't know everything. I love that there's just way more mystery and way more than I can comprehend. I'm very comfortable with that. And you seem to be comfortable with that as well.
Definitely.
So let's start by talking about this bright, dark abyss, you call it. Both of us have dance in our backgrounds. I used to be a professional dancer, and you have dance in your background. So both of us, I think we've talked about this getting lost in wonder, this getting lost in the abyss, and partly that's happened for both of us through dance. It happens in many different ways for people, but talk to us a little bit about the bright, dark abyss.
Well, there's different ways to go at that. To begin with your dance metaphor, I think many of us, probably most of us, if we think about it, have experiences that do not, where our thinking and reflecting mind was pacified by an intensity of attention and focus. So when you're dancing and you're in the movement of it, you're not thinking, I need to put my foot here, I need to turn now, I wonder if my arm's right. It's like you've just simply become absorbed and you are the dance. I suspect this is true of musicians. I think it's true of golfers, or people who do sports, people who love music and just listen with a kind of unmediated attention, and then their mind comes back and they go, oh, that was a nice piece, or I wonder how long it is, or I wonder if people think I'm really smart because I like this kind of music, or whatever you are, but
right, the mental chatter that, yeah.
But we have these experiences of real absorption in experience that where the experience is the whole thing and not our reflection or narrating. And so if we think about that there is this kind of wordless wonder in our own experience, then you can take another step and think about a relationship where you love someone very much and you know them pretty well. Maybe you know them really well. Maybe you've been together 70 years. But part of loving them is loving that they're more than your thoughts about them. Not just that there's facts in their life you don't know, which is certainly true, but there's a quality to them, a quality to their heart that you don't grab hold of. There's a kind of open, a kind of spaciousness, and that they have this openness that you don't grasp or have words for or understand. It's part of loving somebody. And if we take another step, so I'm wanting to say this ability to experience a kind of wordlessness, a kind of sense of the mystery of someone or something, is actually extremely pleasant. It's a kind of joyfulness in the experience or relationship. And then if we think, so we can think about human beings and any being as something that doesn't get reduced to a bunch of categories. And I mean, that's the violence of racism or stereotyping or or how we feel when we go to a kind of not very good doctor who just kind of puts us in a set of categories, and we feel like that's you. It's like not honoring that you're a human,
Mm-hmm.
and so there's something very alienating about that experience.
So this honoring of the fullness of all beings, and then that would be multiplied even more when we think about how we understand the divine. Like,
exactly.
If this is true of somebody we've been with for decades, then how much more is it true of the divine?
Because, I mean, the basic knowledge we have about the divine goodness is that it's not like a being. I mean, to put it most simply, God is the creator of the cosmos. God is not part of the cosmos. God is not a piece of furniture within the cosmos. And so our way of knowing the things in the cosmos is going to be different from our way of knowing God.
So any metaphor we put to it is just that. It's a metaphor because the things of creation are all we know.
Yes.
And the ways that we label the things of creation are the only ways we know how to name. And so we put those onto the divine, and no name can ever be a fullness of what the divine is. Only our ability to call it something.
Yes. And we need those names.
Yeah.
I think of it like writing love poetry or love letters.
Yeah.
So if you're writing a poem or a letter to a deep beloved, and the world is chock full of love poetry.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very evocative. It's very powerful. But even as you read it, you know that those words don't really capture. So you say, I love you to the moon and back. I love my love is deeper than the deepest ocean. And yet you know those words, and so you keep saying words over and over again to, it's like you caress the other with these words, even though those words can't somehow capture how the quality of your deep love. And so our metaphors about God, our words and concepts and our names and our prayers are like love letters. They're precious to us, and through them we caress God, we draw near, we coo, but we also know that these love letters aren't God in God's own being. And this is where, in our religious life or even in our human life, we can go in two directions. We can be uneasy about that. And then we start grasping and we start getting anxious, and we really kill the relationship.
Right.
So that if you're in love with someone and you just can't ever rest in this openness, and you want to say, now tell me more, you didn't explain it right, we have to talk this through, and so you're just like squeezing every drop, there's a risk there that you're going to kill the relationship. And when we are uneasy and untrusting in our love of the mysterious and infinite quality of God, then we damage the relationship. We can't allow our lover to be a lover, and we can't allow God to be God. But there's this turn where, as you said, you're not only comfortable with it, you delight in it. You love that your lover isn't just a set of attributes that you list and say, I love you because of 10 things. You love that about the lovers. You love about God.
And you love that
your ideas.
That it's ever changing, and that it's not static, and it's not. So in our scripture, in our psalm, it's saying that the other idols are static, and they don't breathe, and they don't change, and they have eyes but they can't see. And so it's this contrast with something you can nail down, or touch, or define, or name. So as soon as you do that, you make an idol of the divine.
And one of the core insights of the Hebrew Bible is this awareness of the danger of idolatry.
Yeah.
Which is also often, projected onto other religions. Those other religions have idols and we have Yahweh.
Right.
But actually, it's describing the dynamic of the second commandment, is that you don't have any graven image. You have no image from the earth, from above the earth, or from below the earth. I mean, that's pretty comprehensive. And so we are really invited to name God in all kinds of ways. And we're invited to remember, if we think of them as static and certain, and this is how God is in God's own being, then we are at the risk of moving into idolatry.
Right. And in my field of liturgical studies of worship, we describe this as we have symbols, and symbols point towards something greater than itself. Yeah. And so water is not just the water that we drink every day. Water takes on a bigger meaning, more mysterious meaning around the grace of God, around our baptism, around cleansing, but it is multivalent, we say. It's just there, you cannot nail it down, and meaning is going to have multiple layers. And so all we have is the language of symbol, especially in our worship, to talk about, to try to describe. It's a love letter to God in the ways that we know.
I think so. Our words, our rituals, water, wine, bread, they're like a threshold. And if you remember their liminal quality, experience their liminal quality, that it's a threshold into the non-possessible, mysterious goodness and sweetness of the divine, then it's a doorway. These things are doorways. Yeah. The water of the baptism, the Eucharistic service, they're doorways. But as soon as you say, you get very attached to, this is what the water means, and it doesn't mean that, and if you think that, you're wrong, and so it closes down, then the door closes in a way. It's no longer a threshold into the divine, because you've become absorbed with your own thoughts.
Right. Or someone else's imposed on you.
Toward. You're just like shutting yourself into your thoughts about something.
It reminds me of you mention in your book, in a footnote, actually, your father's influence on you in this very matter of unknowing. And you quote him, and in that quote it talks about that to nail something down, to close that door, is to do a kind of violence to the essence, and like you say, the sweet unknowability, the unpossessiveness, the way we cannot possess. Can you say a little bit more about your father and about that idea?
Well, my father was a great man in many ways, and I learned a great deal from his work. He was a brilliant theologian, but also from him, this person. And I remember I was sitting in the living room with him once, and he had this kind of beatific look on his face. And I knew that he was a brilliant theologian, and people couldn't always understand even what he was writing, never mind what he was thinking. And I said to him, just kind of intuitively, I said, it must be lonely to know things you can't say. And he said to me with this like beatific, sweet smile on his face, he says, if I could say what they were, what it was, it wouldn't be what it is. So that you get the theological lesson, that something is not reducible to words. But looking at his face, being with him, and knowing the transformative power of that, the sweetness, and he was such a kind and compassionate person. So I could kind of see both the theological position that we read about. It's apophatic, it's symbolic, but the power of it, how transformative it is to dwell in that unknowing. And how that dwelling in the unknowing isn't just like, oh, I don't know. It's actually, as we talked about before, it's sinking your roots into something deeply nourishing.
Right. I love this idea of the unknowability, the unpossessibility of the divine. I'm using the inclusive Bible translation in this worship series, and one of the, I mean, I enjoy it for many reasons, but it does use in the psalm for this week, and for other times, the consonants for Yahweh, right? And so it reminds us that during different periods, even speaking the name was, you didn't speak it because it was to speak it was to nail it down too much. You honored it by not saying it or not writing it out, right? So these consonants, um, and and in our psalm today, it says the name of God is beautiful, right? So a beautiful name, and then it goes on to describe attributes of God, and specifically names justice and compassion. And so this is going back to how we use language and how we describe the divine. The only ways we have is to say, well, here's some attributes of the divine that's making me praise in the moment. This is why I praise, right? It's a real poetic form in the Psalms. So this idea that the name is beautiful, and it's beautiful because of God's justice and compassion, does that thing that you're doing again, which is to connect beauty and justice and compassion, and how that is beautiful. Those attributes. And of course, made in the image of the divine, what we pray and hope is that we too are have a beautiful name because of our justice and compassion.
Yes.
Yeah. So you write, our images of the divine are reflected in how we treat others. Doesn't get any more plain than that. But do you want to say more about that?
Well, I think I'm very aware of the way religion can make us the best we are, and it can help us be the worst we are. And I was talking to someone yesterday about how heartbreaking it is not only to hear someone defend racism or the mistreatment of immigrants at our border. It's very painful to hear those things, this kind of hatred of life.
Yeah.
But really is like the knife in the heart, the twist, is when it's because of Jesus.
Yeah.
Where the worship of the name of Jesus in this twisted way becomes the reason to violate others. And this again is the core insight, one of the core insights of the Bible, that if we misname God, we mistreat each other. And why it's so important to bless the holy name, and why in the Hebrew Bible and in the New Testament, it's constantly expressed in how we treat each other. The widow, the orphan, the stranger, all of the people. I love the stories of Jesus. He's so offensive. There's just nobody he avoids offending, because he just sees the humanity of everyone, and responds to them as if they're actually human and present and interesting and important. Whether they're a centurion or a menstruating woman or whoever they are. And so this coincidence of loving this unnameable goodness of the divine and loving the creation of God and all of these beings, that for all kinds of reasons we develop categories for why these people don't matter, or
So in our contemplative practices this week, I mentioned that we're going to look at something we don't know, research something we don't know, right? This abyss, this wonder, this majesty, this incredible universe that we live in. And not for the sake of like nailing it down or to say, I know about this now, but to open yet another aspect of, oh my gosh, look what I didn't know.
Yeah.
Look how amazing this is. And there's so much more that I don't know. So it's that adage, the more you know you don't know, right?
Yeah.
And that is mysterious and wonderful and amazing. So that's
Yes.
one of the contemplative practices or ritual actions that we're inviting people to do, is to learn something new, but also stay open to what we don't know about that. How else does contemplation train us to be okay with unknowing? You call it the path of unknowing.
In the Christian contemplative tradition, there's a very rich history of imageless meditation. So training your mind to be aware in an imageless way. Centering prayer actually is a form of that. Where you're not praying with an object or an image, but you're kind of in a way pacifying images. So many people find that a difficult way to pray. So I'm not really going to talk about that. I just want to acknowledge that that's a very deep part of our tradition. But I think another way of thinking about it is to have the courage of trust, to remember that our faith isn't about what we are thinking. I think there's an odd way in which we confuse our faith in God with faith in whatever our thoughts about God are at the time. So that if those thoughts get interrupted, if we experience something or learn something that interrupts our way of thinking about God, then we feel like, oh, my faith is destroyed. Your faith wasn't in God. Your faith was in an idea you had. It was in the contents of your own mind. And I don't mean this in a mocking way. I mean this is how our minds work. And so we get a broken heart. But that broken heart, when we encounter something that challenges what we think of as our faith, actually is such a gift. It's such a mercy, because we can rely on trust to say, God is so much more than my thoughts. So that if this thought is abandoned, God is going to go along just fine.
Right. It's freeing, really, right? God's self doesn't depend on my perception of God. Thank goodness.
And exactly, because we're mistaken about our best friend. Why would we be mistaken about God?
Right.
And so if we can, but because it's so tender to us and we rely on it so much, if we are challenged, it feels very painful and unsettling. But that's the moment where you remember, I actually, and this takes courage. I think faith is courage. You remember that God is so much more. And if you're in a space of, I don't know who God is, I feel lost, you go, that's okay. God can hold me in my lostness until I don't feel so lost. And in this lostness, I'm actually learning much, much more about how good God is. So it's a kind of remembering of how much you trust God, and that you trust God. You don't trust your beliefs about God.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. I'm imagining a contemplative practice right now here on the spot, and that is a kind of journaling about, here's what I don't know, right? So here's what, I'm a person of deep faith, and yet there's a lot that I don't get about how God works or how creation works, or, I studied theology as long as you can study it and get as many degrees as you can, but there's a whole lot I don't know. So even just journaling, like, here are things I don't know. I don't know this and this and this. And then, like the psalmist in Psalms of Lament, end it with, but you, oh God, are God. And you, and I trust you.
Yes.
I trust you with all this stuff that I don't know. And it's okay that I don't know it.
Yeah.
But open me, God, to what I might discover.
Yeah.
In a non-anxious kind of way.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I'll have an experience where I'll learn. A lot of learning is more information. But every now and then I'll have an experience of learning something that rearranges the way I understand the world. And I think a lot of people find that unpleasant. But I actually find it just the way you described it. Mm-hmm. Oh my God, the world is different than I thought. It is bigger, it is more tragic, it is more beautiful. And it's an adventure, it's invigorating. The world, of course, the world's not the way I thought it would be. Why would it? Why would it? And so I do think this is a posture of courage, and trust, really deep trust.
Yeah. Oh, well, I hope that it can be so. And maybe one other thing, that goes with this week is that there is a quote from your book that we use in the opening of this service that says that for those living a contemplative life, there is a sweetness of longing and of tasting in which one ceases to praise and becomes pure praise, an unending chant to the divine goodness. We started talking about dancing, and so for everybody it will be different. However you can get lost in, some people call it flow, groove, a jam, whatever it is that gives you that ability to just, whatever it's, I've seen some people who knit that way, they just get lost in it, whether it's playing a musical instrument or whatever it is. Maybe that is to find that thing you can do where you lose the chatter and you just get lost in it. And that in and of itself is a beautiful life, a contemplative life.
Yes.
And to get more of that. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
All right.